I walked into my house after losing everything, and my wife didn't ask if I was okay. She looked me dead in the eye and said I was worthless, that she was taking our kids and leaving. But when I said 5 words, her face went white, because she had no idea what I had discovered that morning. You know how people always say life can change in an instant? I used to think that was just something people said to sound deep, like one of those motivational poster quotes you see in office break rooms. But I'm here to tell you it's real. One morning I woke up as a man with a career, a family, and a future. By that afternoon, I had none of those things. Well, I thought I had none of those things. Turned out, I'd been living a lie for a lot longer than just one day. But before we get to that part, before we get to the 5 words that made my wife's face go completely white, let me tell you how it started. And if this story hits home for you, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who got knocked down and found a way to stand back up. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. It was a Tuesday. 15 years I'd been at Morrison & Associates, one of the best architectural firms in the state. 15 years of early mornings, late nights, missed soccer games, and sacrificed weekends. I wasn't just an employee, I was a partner track guy. Everyone said so. My boss told me I had a future there. I believed him. So when his assistant called that morning and asked me to come to his office, I actually thought it might be good news. Maybe that promotion we'd been dancing around. I straightened my tie, grabbed my coffee, and walked in with a smile. 10 minutes later, I was walking out with a cardboard box and a security guard at my elbow. Downsizing, they called it. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. The words came at me like I was underwater, muffled, distant, not quite real. 15 years, and I got the same speech they probably gave the intern who'd been there 3 months. They didn't even let me go back to my desk alone. I had to pack up my things with this kid in a uniform watching me like I might steal a stapler. My coworkers wouldn't look at me. They just stared at their computer screens, pretending to be busy, pretending they weren't watching me carry my entire career out in a box that used to hold printer paper. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. My phone kept buzzing. Vanessa, my wife. She'd called 4 times already. I didn't answer. I needed to figure out how to tell her in person. How do you tell your wife of 12 years that you just lost the job that pays for everything? The mortgage, the car payments, the kids' school supplies, her yoga classes, the vacations she'd been planning for next summer. Vanessa hadn't worked in 8 years. That was my idea, actually. I insisted. I wanted her home with the kids, Tyler and Megan. I wanted to be the provider, the man who took care of his family. And now I couldn't even take care of myself. I started driving home, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Thinking about Tyler's face when I told him we might need to cut back on his robotics club. Thinking about Megan asking why we couldn't go to Disneyland anymore. Thinking about Vanessa's reaction. She'd be supportive, right? She'd tell me it was okay, that we'd figure it out together. That's what wives do. That's what marriage is. I was stopped at a red light when I saw it. Vanessa's car. That silver SUV, I'd bought her 3 years ago for our anniversary. It was parked outside Marcello's, this upscale Italian place downtown. The kind of place we only went to for birthdays or anniversaries. It was 11:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. What was she doing there? I should have kept driving. I should have gone straight home. But something in my gut twisted, and before I knew it, I was pulling into that parking lot. I walked through my front door an hour later, and the house looked exactly like it always did. Tyler's backpack dumped by the stairs. Megan's drawing of our family stuck to the fridge with a magnet. The TV playing some cooking show in the living room. Everything normal. Everything a lie. Because I knew what I'd seen at that restaurant. I'd watched my wife hold hands with Rick Caldwell, my former college roommate. The guy I'd helped start his consulting business. The guy who'd been over for dinner just last week. I'd watched her lean across the table and touch his face like he was hers. Like I didn't exist. And I'd heard enough of their conversation to know this wasn't new. This was planned. Calculated. They were waiting for me to be free. Waiting for the right moment. Well, guess what? The moment just arrived. And she had no idea. Vanessa was in the kitchen when I walked in. And the second she saw the box in my hands, That pathetic cardboard box with my nameplate and coffee mug and 15. Years of my life stuffed inside her, whole expression changed. Not to concern, not to sympathy, to calculation. I watched her eyes narrow, watched her brain start working through something. "We need to talk," I said, setting the box on the counter. My voice came out steadier than I expected. She crossed her arms. "What happened? No, are you okay? No, what's wrong?" "Just logistics. Just facts." "They let me go," I told her. "Budget cuts. Effective immediately." I waited for her to react like a wife should react. To come over and hug me. To tell me we'd get through it. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me like I'd just told her I'd crashed the car. "How long until you find something else?" she asked. Not if, when. Like I was a problem she needed to solve. "Could be a few months," I admitted. "The market's tough right now. But I've got severance and we have savings," she cut me off. "Savings you have. Everything's in your name, Alex. Everything." The way she said it made my blood run cold. Like she'd been thinking about this. Like she'd been planning for this exact conversation. And then she'll let me have it. Everything she'd apparently been holding back for years just came pouring out. I wasn't a husband, I was just a paycheck. I was mediocre. I was boring. She'd sacrificed her career and her dreams for me. And look where it got her. Stuck with a man who couldn't even keep a job? The kids deserved better than watching their father fail. Her voice got louder with every sentence, and I just stood there. Still holding on to the edge of that counter, letting her words hit me like punches. Tyler appeared in the doorway. 9 years old, his eyes wide and scared. "Mom," Vanessa spun on him. "Go to your room now," disappeared like a ghost, and I felt something crack inside my chest. She turned back to me and her eyes were blazing. "You're worthless, Alex. You know that? Worthless. No job, no spine, no future." She stepped closer, like she wanted me to see the contempt in her face. "I'm taking the kids. I'm filing for divorce. And you're going to give me everything because you've got nothing left to fight with." The house went silent except for the sound of that stupid cooking show still playing in the other room. She stood there, breathing hard, triumphant, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for me to beg. "Nothing to say?" she sneered. "Typical. You never fight for anything." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said 5 words. 5 words that I'd been holding since that restaurant. "I saw you with Rick." Her face drained of every drop of color, and I knew I'd just detonated a bomb she never saw coming. That night, Vanessa locked herself in the guest room. The house felt like a tomb. I could hear Tyler crying softly in his room, Megan asking him what was wrong in that little 6-year-old voice that broke my heart into pieces. I wanted to go comfort them, but I needed to think. I needed to be smart about this, because everything in me wanted to rage, to break things, to scream. But that's not how you win. That's how you lose everything. I sat in my home office until 3 in the morning, staring at the wall, my mind racing through 18 months of memories. Every late night, Vanessa claimed, was a book club meeting. Every time Rick suddenly showed up at family barbecues. Every time she pushed me to make him a partner in some investment opportunity. It had all been there. I'd just been too trusting, too stupid, too busy working myself to death to see it. But trust doesn't win custody battles. Trust doesn't protect your kids. Evidence does. The next morning, after Vanessa took the kids to school without saying a word to me, I opened our shared laptop. She'd always been careless with passwords, used the same one for everything. Her email opened on the second try, and what I found made my hands shake so hard I almost couldn't take screenshots. 18 months. That's how long she'd been planning this with Rick. Emails talking about how much longer she'd have to pretend. Messages about waiting until Rick's business took off so they could be together. Detailed conversations about custody strategy, about how to maximize what she'd get in the divorce, about the timeline. The timeline that apparently just got moved up because I'd lost my job. I backed everything up to a secure cloud account. Every email. Every text message I could find. Every photo she'd tried to delete but hadn't emptied from trash. Then I checked our bank accounts, and my stomach dropped through the floor. $47,000. Gone. Transferred to an account in her mother's name 3 weeks ago. Another $15,000 withdrawn in cash over the past 2 months, spread out, thinking I wouldn't notice. Our credit cards maxed out on purchases I'd never seen. Clothes, jewelry, hotel rooms. She'd been systematically bleeding us dry, and I'd been too focused on work to catch it. I called the bank immediately, reported the unauthorized transfers, froze every joint account we had. Then I called Patricia Maroa, divorce attorney my buddy from college had recommended when his marriage fell apart. I was in her office by 2 o'clock that afternoon with a folder full of printed evidence that could have been a novel. Patricia looked through everything with the kind of calm that told me she'd seen this before. She's committed fraud, she said simply. Moving marital assets without consent, draining accounts, that's illegal. The affair impacts custody and asset division in your favor. But Alex, we have a problem. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. Without your income, she's going to claim she needs substantial spousal support. She hasn't worked in 8 years. A judge might. I'm working on that, I interrupted. I didn't have a solution yet, but I'd find one. Had to. That evening, I drove to Rick's consulting office. Didn't call ahead, just walked right in. The receptionist barely looked up before I was through his door. Rick's face went from surprise to guilty in half a second. Alex, man, I can explain how long? I asked. My voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. He stammered something about it just happening, about not meaning for it to go this far. The same garbage every cheater says when they get caught. I know about the business plans, I said. I know you two were using my money. And I have every email. Every text. Every piece of evidence that proves it. Rick went pale. You're bluffing. It wasn't a nice smile. Try me. 3 days after I froze the accounts, Vanessa came storming into my home office like a hurricane. She'd tried to withdraw cash that morning and got declined. Tried to use the credit card for groceries and got declined. Checked the bank app and saw every account locked down tight. What the hell did you do? She screamed. Her face was red, her hands were shaking, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I had the power. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her calmly. I protected our assets from theft. You moved $47,000 without my consent. That's called fraud, Vanessa. Mouth opened and closed like a fish. That money was for the kids. For their future. The lie came out so smooth, so practiced. I almost believed she believed it. That money was for Rick, I said, and we both know it. I pulled out the bank statements, slid them across the desk. Showed her every transfer, every withdrawal, every date that lined up perfectly with her emails to him. You stole from your own children to fund an affair. So yeah, I froze everything. And my lawyer says you could face charges. I watched her face cycle through emotions, anger, fear, denial, panic. She tried to say something, but her phone rang. Rick's name flashed on the screen. She looked at me, looked at the phone, then answered and walked into the hallway. But I could hear every word. Rick was panicking. His voice was high, strained, desperate. Something about an investigation going public? About clients pulling out? About lawsuits? And then I heard Vanessa's voice crack. What do you mean you're bankrupt? Silence. Then, but you said we'd be together. You promised we'd start over. You said your business was Rick. Cut her off. I couldn't hear his exact words, but I heard enough. Something about needing her to stay quiet. Something about not being able to have the affair exposed during an investigation. I can't right now, Vanessa. His voice came through, tinny and distant. I need to focus on not going to prison. The call ended. I heard Vanessa sink down against the hallway wall. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. But that evening, something happened that made everything worth it. Tyler knocked on my office door, came in and sat down in the chair across from me, his little legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor. Dad, is Mom leaving because you lost your job? The question hit me like a truck. I wanted to lie, to protect him, but I'd been lied to enough for both of us. No, buddy, I said carefully. Mom and I have some grown-up problems that have nothing to do with you or your sister. And nothing to do with my job." He nodded slowly, then said something that made my throat tight. "Mom's been mean lately. She talks different on the phone when she thinks we're not listening." Me and Megan hear her, my 9-year-old son. Hearing his mother plot to destroy his father, "I heard the fight," he whispered. "When she called you worthless," he looked up at me with those big brown eyes. "But you're not worthless, Dad. You taught me to ride my bike. You help with my homework every night. You make us pancakes on Saturday mornings. Mom says you never fight for anything, but that's not true. You fight for us." I pulled him into a hug and tried not to let him feel me shaking. The next morning, Patricia called with news that changed everything. Rick's company wasn't just failing it was under federal investigation for fraud. And any money Vanessa had given him was now evidence. She could face charges for money laundering. The walls were closing in on both of them. But for me, the walls were finally coming down. 6 weeks after the worst day of my life, I walked into family court with Patricia by my side and a folder full of evidence that told the whole story. Vanessa sat on the other side of the courtroom with her lawyer, some guy in a cheap suit who kept whispering urgently in her ear. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired, beaten down. Part of me felt sorry for her. But then I remembered Tyler's face when he asked if his mom was leaving because of me, and that sympathy evaporated like steam. Her lawyer went first, painted Vanessa as a devoted mother who'd sacrificed her career to raise the children. Said she was remorseful about the affair, that it was a mistake born from feeling neglected and unappreciated. They conveniently left out the 18 months of planning, the stolen money, and the fact that she'd called me worthless in front of our son. When Patricia stood up, she didn't waste time with sympathy. She laid out the timeline of the affair, showed the emails about custody strategy and asset division, presented bank records showing systematic theft of marital funds. Then she pulled out the text messages, the ones where Vanessa threatened to turn the kids against me, to make sure I'd never see them again, to take everything I'd ever worked for. I watched the judge's face harden with every page she read. When Vanessa's lawyer tried to object, tried to claim those messages were taken out of context, the judge held up her hand. "I've read enough," she said. Then she asked to hear from character witnesses. Tyler's teacher testified that Vanessa had missed every parent-teacher conference that year. My new employer, because yes, I'd landed something even better, spoke about my work ethic and dedication. Even our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, talked about how she'd seen me with the kids every day, how she'd watched Vanessa leave for hours at a time with no explanation. Vanessa tried to speak, tried to defend herself, but the judge cut her off. "Mrs. Brennan, I've heard enough." The courtroom went silent. "Your actions show a pattern of deception, financial misconduct, and a willingness to prioritize your own desires over your children's welfare. You called your husband worthless, yet the evidence shows he's been the stable, present parent." The judge looked down at her notes, then back up at Vanessa. "I'm granting primary physical custody to Mr. Brennan. You'll have supervised visitation till you can demonstrate stability and appropriate judgment. The marital home stays with Mr. Brennan. You'll repay the stolen funds through your portion of any settlement. And given your affair and financial fraud, I'm denying spousal support." Vanessa's face crumpled. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt relieved. My kids would be safe. They'd have stability. They'd have a parent who put them first. A week later, I saw Rick's face on the news. Federal wire fraud charges. 5 to 7 years if convicted. Turns out he'd been running his business like a Ponzi scheme, taking money from new clients to pay old ones. Elderly people had lost their retirement savings. Vanessa's money, what little actually reached him, was seized as evidence. She'd never get it back. She'd lost everything chasing a fantasy with a con man. These days, life looks different. Tyler's in robotics club, competing in tournaments. Megan's taking art classes and covering our fridge with drawings of our family, just the 3 of us now. I bought out my contract and went fully independent. Turns out losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to my career. I'm making twice what I used to, working half the hours, and actually present for my kids. Vanessa sees them every other weekend now. No more supervision, she's proven she can be civil. But the damage is done. The kids are polite, but distant. They don't ask to stay with her longer.